Those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen. Nerds International proudly presents.
We want to take you on a quest for knowledge. One that will take us from ancient medieval fantasy across the far reaches of space to the distant future. To many savage worlds.
Welcome to episode 83 of the Wild Eye Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to Pinnacle Entertainment's Savage Worlds, aimed at beginners and veterans alike. Paris is cracking his neck. He's looking down at his notes. He's shaking his head up and down, yes, like he's ready to go. And Eric is cracking a fresh beer, and he is ready to rock it out. All right, what are we doing today, Lamoureux?
Adventures. Well, first, good morning, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hi, Eric.
Hello. No.
Hello, Mr. Lamoureux.
Yeah. No, today I figured we'd go to some for beginners a little bit, talking about adventures. And what I mean by that is the type of adventure formats or modules that are typical, expected, or common for Savage Worlds. And I also asked a bunch of people on Facebook what their favorite format was, and if they felt some of those types of adventures were underrepresented, and what they'd like to see more of, that type of thing. So that's what we're going to talk about. But first, a little bit of feedback from last show about swag. We talked about Affinity, which is a program to do layout. And we talked we said that it was $50 US. But one of my buddies, Matt Stark, said that there are quite a few sales for this program. So if you think that's a bit steep, just wait a little bit for a sale. Usually it's like $30 when it's a sale, but I don't know. I don't have it and I haven't looked at it, but it's just a heads up for people. If you think you can use it, then just wait for a sale. And then a little bit of news.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the news. The news is incoming. Prepare yourself for the news. News! And some announcements about the Nerds International Network and the Wild Eye.
Sip of beer.
Why not have two sips of beer?
Sip of whiskey.
Oh, wow. He's going hardcore today. I feel like the sleeves are going to get ripped off here any moment.
Yeah.
There it is. There's the pipes.
Yeah, the guns are out. Sun's out, guns out. Woo.
There's the sweet little, sweet brony tattoo that you got on your left arm there. I like that.
It's my tribal scorpion. It's a scorpion. That's my sign. So that's why I had that done.
Nice.
Very cool.
Long time ago, like 15 years ago. All right. So for the news, we found out recently that Suede is shipping soon. Well, actually, it has started this weekend. The weekend we're recording this episode. Shane, Clint, and Jody are in Tennessee to sign about 2,000 copies of those collector's edition books.
Arthritis. Yikes.
Awesome. Were you boys getting one of those?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, but did Gary?
Yeah, Gary too.
Yeah, I don't know what I got. I just paid a bunch of money. I just paid a ton of money for stuff.
We all got the box, and then the box and the collector's edition one. So, yeah, they're going to sign those, and I think they're starting with the easiest kind of packages. Probably people that just that ordered the book, the regular edition. I know some people have already received it, apparently, from looking at Facebook. But and then they're gonna ship out those boxes and collector's editions, starting with the U.S. That should be this week. America with number one. Right.
Yeah, I want to say America and all Canadian borderland cities, which is me, because I live like 5 minutes from America. So
as Australia, all the rest of the world in Australia have got together, and we've decided that Savage Worlds Adventure Edition has to be treated like dinner. So everyone has to be served before anyone's allowed to start eating. All right, so you can have them. Just can't look at them until we get out.
Can't open it. Good deal. Yeah, so America first, then it's going to be Europe, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and finally the rest of the world. They anticipate everything leaving by the end of September. So that means some people might not get their stuff till October. Sorry, not sorry.
Wow, stiff.
Keep an eye out on your front porch or your mailbox. Probably the front porch, because that's going to be a big box. But yeah, looking forward to that.
And don't forget to tune into the Wild Dice every fortnight for a new episode where Eric will rub more salt in your wound as you wait.
Eric's going to show you all of the beautiful pages and the signature. That's how we're opening the show. And then I'll show you mine.
Yeah, we'll do that.
3 months later, Paris will show us his.
Maybe. See, you got to look on the bright side. You might get it for Christmas. It's going to be a nice present right there.
How much would it hurt if...
Nothing like buying my own Christmas present that took forever to get here. Fully understand, Peg, why it's that way. We're just very, very salty here at the bottom half of the world, constantly waiting, paying more. We love our hobby.
I just want to say, how cool would it be if the boat that had all the books on it came into the harbor on fire? No? No?
Be like that episode of The Simpsons when that ship hits the rock and all the hot pants are floating out in the water. We'll be just jumping in trying to get them all. But from what I understand of Australia, though, it's all being sent to one distribution centre, so it shouldn't be too bad here in Australia, at least.
Well, hopefully nothing bad happens to that distribution centre. Otherwise, it'll be like... In other news today, an Australian man jumped into the pit of venomous animals and is now no longer with us. And then it'll be Paris Conte on the bottom.
Hey, you never know.
Dude, if something happens to this shipment, I'm coming for you because you have jinxed it.
He'll steal your copy. No, I remember when Harrison ordered the Flash Gordon, and that's what they did. They shipped a whole container or pallet over to the UK, but it still took like a year for Harrison to get his Flash Gordon stuff. Like,
don't say that.
Everybody else did. That's how bad it was. So hopefully that doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. And it showed up dented and broken too, didn't it?
That I don't know. Just
join in the fray, Eric. You're supposed to say yes, so Paris feels even worse.
Now, well, see, the thing is, in England, they're pretty laid, like, you know, there's nothing for them to worry about, so they just took their time. Here in Australia, to deliver the news, it's like, you know, those zombie movies where they get a bus and they armor plate it and put wire around the outside, and, you know, because we got to deal with all the animals here, so we're pretty used to getting stuff out quick. You know, I'm mucking around here, right? It's just too dangerous.
That's right. Something else that came out recently, yesterday, so that would have been Friday the 23rd of August, a preview for Deadlands Dark Ages, an adventure for it. Yep, and this is basically the preview. It's got a short adventure and pre-gens, couple setting rules there, but they do say in there that it's subject to change until the release that is due next year. Don't know when exactly next year, but it's coming out. So I looked at that this morning. You've got the Paladin. Some odd about it is that they have peacemakers. they have guns. So yeah, that's kind of weird. And it's got the room cap setting rule in there, which I think is weird too. But yeah, you get a preview of the archetypes. It looks quite good. I mean, I've been looking forward to Dark Ages for a while. Might be my next fantasy setting, so campaign there. So check it out. I think it came out only for the Kickstarter backers, but I would anticipate that it comes out for the rest of the world too soon.
Yeah, unfortunately, our email's slow too, so we probably won't get our email for 3 months.
No, I mean, you just log into your Pinnacle account, and under downloads, you're going to find it in there, along with something else too that came out, the digital versions of the gear cards. So you got armor and weapons. This is something that's going to be in the box if you order that from the Kickstarter, but you get the digital version there. I know I've been using my digital bookmarks to read my PDFs there. No.
Cool.
You guys didn't get it? No. Joke from Matt Stark. Yeah, you don't need digital bookmarks to read a PDF. Come on. Wake up, Paris.
Wow.
Dude,
Wake up.
I'm digital. Like, I'm sorry. How excited can I get about bookmarks? Seriously. I'm like, Gary, help me.
I didn't.
Joke was a fail.
I didn't get that joke. That went right over my head. Maybe it was the guy.
And you're tall, so like that's fair way over someone's head.
It is.
Yes. No, he was looking at some at the same time as usual. He doesn't pay attention to what I'm saying. He's just looking at the store and downloading stuff because he forgot to do.
So it's
Well,
like,
we all went, "Oh, Dark Age is out." Oh, well,
gear cards in my box.
He's getting that.
saving my energy for taking it to the edge.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do now to talk about adventures, the formats.
It's very exciting.
You're listening to the Wild Die Podcast. 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 Listen 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 to the Wild Die Podcast.
All right. So, last week I asked our listeners on Facebook and social media which adventure scenario format is their favorite and why, and if they feel some formats should be better represented. I mean, I figured we'd go over the most popular ones or the most well-known ones. The Savage Tales, this is basically, it can be any length, right? It can be just a few paragraphs or it can be almost 20 pages, but it's basically designed to be played in one session. The concept is that you read it and then you just play it right away without any preparation, basically.
So is it just page count that makes it different from a one sheet?
Yeah, I mean, the one sheet is basically a concept of fitting onto one sheet of paper that you can take with you to a convention or to your buddies. That night you have to run a game. I know a while back Harrison ran 2 one sheets for Saga of the Goblin Horde, and he said he didn't even read them before they started playing. Really, he just read them as they were playing. He managed to run 2 in one night in one session, so it's designed that all the information is easy for you to find. The stat blocks are there. So yeah, you just read it, because I know I started running a game last weekend, and this isn't Savage Worlds, but very good.
Blasphemy.
I know it's Achtung Cthulhu. It's the Three Kings, but it's with the Gumshoe system, Trail of Cthulhu. And it's a really cool adventure. I've ran it before, but it's been a few years, and I'm running this game, and I read it twice, and then I've got like 30 pages to sift through. Sometimes looking for information, and it's bogging things down and slowing things down. A little bit frustrating. So in that regard, one sheets are really good because, you know, it's only 2 pages. So chances are you're going to find what you need really fast. Then you got the plot point campaigns, which is basically a compendium of Savage Tales. You get, 20 or 30 of them in a book. They're organized better because there's like an underlying story in there, a meta plot. And I'm going to quote Matt Cutter he wrote all of the Deadlands plot point campaigns, so he knows what he's talking about. And he says, the best plot point campaigns maintain the overall story in a compelling way, at the same time making few or even no assumptions about who the characters are or when each episode is to be played. So, yeah, it's just a bunch of Savage Tales put together that you can Gary's ran 50 Fathoms quite a few times, and you get to a location, there's a Savage Tale for that location, and you don't have that much to read. You've got a few paragraphs at the most, and you can get started right away. You don't have to read 30 pages of background on what's going on in that place before you can run it. So these are probably the most iconic ones from that Pinnacle publishes. Of course, other aces, the licensees, publish different kinds, like the serials, something that you're probably more familiar with if you're coming from D&D. So you get modules. Hellfrost is like that. That's how it's structured. Sorry, burping beer.
We're pros.
Yeah,
so pro.
That's how Hellfrost does it, because they got modules about 30 pages long, and they all work in a series for a mega campaign. War of the Dead is the same thing too. You get 52 episodes spread over 4 seasons, so 4 books. You could play every week for a year, and you would go through the campaign. Now there's a few more like that, but I don't think it's the norm. So, yeah, let's ask you guys, Gary, of all the ones that I mentioned, are there any that are your favorite, or you've got your own favorite in there?
My personal favorite, plot point campaign. Sign me up. One sheets are great if you're going to sit down and just have like a one shot of a game, but there isn't enough stuff in a one shot, like, to sort of get into your character the feels of your character. Even when we ran the everybody is what's his face? Do you remember when we did that? That was a lot of fun. I've seen that guy 1,000 times. What the hell was his name, Eric? Well, you ran it. You ran the adventure called Everybody Is, and we all had to play that actor.
Leagues of Nicolas Cage.
Right. So everybody was Nicolas Cage, right? But you watched the show. I understood who the character was supposed to be. It was fantastic and a lot of fun. But there's not enough sustenance for me in a one sheet. Savage Tales, I think is the same thing. It's just a bigger one sheet, right? It's just a more it's 2 sheets instead of 1 sheet. But the plot point campaign, you can get some solid character development going on, and you can build your own little castle or, your little fort. Every time the story progresses, you could do a little bit more. In a game that I'm playing with Matt Stark, him and Jean what is his name? Charles Jean. He's got two first names, which is actually kind of confusing. So Charles, the two guys, one of them is building a sawmill inside of his fantasy world, and Matt is building a brothel in the town of New Haven. So you see what I mean? There's some backstory stuff going on there that's not really sort of in the gameplay to help build the characters up and sort of make them a little more well-rounded, which is why I would prefer something along the lines of a plot point campaign. I like that it's episodic or individual sort of adventures. You can wrap them up in 2 or 3 hours and pick up where you left off. The serials, I've never played the serials because I don't think that I could get a group to commit to that time length. 50 some odd games over a year, man, it's hard to get people, together for 6 adventures in a row, let alone try and get somebody to pop into, committing to a year. So yeah, plot point campaign.
What you're still running with D&D, those big modules like Keep on the Borderlands and that stuff?
Those will run for 4 sessions, kind of a thing, maybe. Do you know what I mean? They're not really a module adventure could probably take, let's say, 3-4 adventures for 3-4 hours a pop, and then you're done. You set it aside. That story's finished, right? Modules would more along the lines fall into what a Savage Tale is, because
I think what he's referring to is like the A1 series Against the Giants. So you'd play module 1, which then lead to module 2, module 3. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Eric?
that's
so the characters evolve. So it's a bit like a plot point campaign, but it's more of a following one after the other. There's not really a break in there in terms of doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
No, I said that because Gary keeps speaking fondly of the days where he would run, big D&D modules, and turns out that it's not really a thing in Savage Worlds, and I'm just wondering why not, Hellfrost is kind of like that, but I can probably name them on one hand. How many settings have adventures like that? So
it's interesting because the way D&D handles it is a lot of what D&D did is for the world of Forgotten Realms. So it's all just basically fantasy and stuff. Like there's others, of course, right? But the big one was Forgotten Realms. And then inside of it, you would just have adventures that you would go do in certain locations. When you come over to Savage Worlds, you have, instead of just having Forgotten Realms as a world, you have, there's Shaintar and Hellfrost, and you know what I mean? You've got tons of different worlds, and each one of them has adventures inside of it, as opposed to one world with a lot of adventures. You have a lot of worlds with a couple adventures, and that was a bit of a learning curve.
That drives you crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because, well, that's the thing, right?
Get you on a rant.
Here we go, buddy. The problem with that is that when you read Forgotten Realms and you learn the lore of the world, you know it. You hop into Hellfrost. I got to learn about all the personalities in Hellfrost, all the locations in Hellfrost, all of that kind of stuff, right? The people's places and things inside of Hellfrost. And then I go play another one like Shaintar, and I got to start all over again. Who are the lords and kings? What are the realms? What are the names? What happens there? Ain't nobody got time for that.
Fair enough. What about you, Paris? What's your preferred one?
So for Savage Worlds, my preference is the one sheet, mainly because I very rarely take a published adventure or plot point campaign and run it that way. There's so many. You're right. It's a lot of information to sort of absorb if you're looking at settings, etc. And inevitably, the games that I play have to be very quick. So, and I don't retain a lot of information while I'm in session in terms of the adventure and the setting and stuff, because I'm so focused on the actual role playing or what's happening. I need a very quick reference to what the core bits of this adventure. It's usually why I run my own stuff as opposed to anything published. But those things that I have run plot point campaigns. I've run the ETU one, which was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. The only problems I have with a plot point campaign is I find, and this could very well be just my view on it, but I find that many plot point campaigns were written for an original test group or an original group of characters, if you will. In fact, a lot of them come with those archetypes, and you kind of, I always got the impression you were expected to kind of play those characters as opposed to your own. And in my experience with plot points as you go along, I get the impression that if your characters deviate too far from those archetypes, sometimes those plot point campaigns don't work, and you end up having to, not that they don't work, but you've got to do a lot more jury rigging to sort of shoehorn your stuff in. And if I'm going to be doing that much work, I may as well be writing my own stuff. If you get what I mean. Like, I've got my own format of taking a certain amount of notes that I can address within a game, and that clicks my brain to go, oh yeah, that's what I meant there. This is what I'm trying to get to. But the other reason I think I like one-shots is because I deal with a lot of new players. There's not a lot of stuff that they have to know. Gary's talked many times about various things that we've reviewed or read, and there's all this backstory stuff that everyone seems to think they need to have. Hellfrost is an incredibly detailed world, as is Shinetar. We could have a whole other episode, though, about how much information you need to have a great game in any one of those worlds, and how much information that you'd have to take on board to make it happen. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what people publish. We make all these worlds our own, don't we? As GMs, it's never going to run the way that the original writer had anticipated. So one shot.
But I get a lot I get a lot of feedback from people as we're going to mention these people, but it seems like a lot of people need a lot of hand holding as far as running their own games. They want everything done for them, and just
I think hand holding, it depends on like how time poor you are, how experienced you are. There's a lot of reasons. Like the three of us, we're seasoned campaigners, and it does not just Savage World season campaigns. We've been playing for a long time of various systems. So we get into a mold, we get into a rhythm, and we have our style. And when you get your own style and then you try and shoehorn someone else's style or someone else's adventures into it, it doesn't quite work. But I'm noticing, as I'm training a new game master at the moment, it's not until you actually sit down and train someone else, like you actually focus on training someone else to be a game master, do you realize just how much stuff that we as experienced game masters take for granted that is known, or how things should be presented, or even to the way that you should present an NPC or keep the energy in a game flowing, how to present information. It's not until you see someone that's starting to learn that craft that you go, wow, there's a lot of stuff that we've picked up along the way and changed and adapted to our own style to keep our groups running. And that's why I guess plot point campaigns are good for that. I think for a new game master that wants to commit themselves to a bigger game, much like Gary's saying, if you can find players that will commit to something that long, fantastic. One thing I will add to this, and I don't know if we want to have that discussion in this one or later, but I would argue that the feel-good payoff of advancing a character in Savage Worlds is not quite as exciting as it is in other systems. Like, undoubtedly our characters evolve and they get better and better and better. But I always had this feeling that some other game systems do that. Your character has advanced, gives a bit of better payoff than Savage Worlds. Savage Worlds just seems to be like, I don't know, because we've crafted that idea in our head of what this character is, we kind of build it. We've already built it from the start. There's sort of not that expectation to, I've suddenly got a new level, what can I do now, kind of thing. Does that make sense at all?
No, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. The power curve's not the same with Savage Worlds, where, I mean, you can build a novice character that actually feels like what your character concept is like. It's already accomplished. And I think we talked about this in previous episodes, maybe a year or so ago at least. But then again, I've ran campaigns in Savage Worlds, and I don't feel like players were complaining that they weren't satisfied with advancement. But I hear what you're saying, and I hear that complaint.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me just clarify. I wouldn't call it a complaint. What I'm really saying is that when you create a character in Savage Worlds, at least from my perspective, and I could be very wrong, I have an idea of who this character is right from the get-go, and it will be that character right to the end, kind of thing. Like, you sort of pre-build your character. Whereas in other game systems, I get the impression that you start off as a character and you're all very, you're very green. And as you progress, you don't have to give a lot of thought as to where you're going to get to at the end, because as each level is spoon-fed to you, kind of thing, you suddenly get new decisions, and you go, oh. And there's a satisfaction in that actually adapts to the story as well. But again, that could be just me. So I'll leave it at that.
Here's something I want to throw out for a quick second here. I've heard the same thing from a guy that I game with, Wesley, and he said that one of the things in Savage Worlds that doesn't really appeal to him is that when you advance, it doesn't have as much of a pop as it does inside of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm curious now that that I'm stopping and thinking about it, if it has to do with the fact that in D&D you can see what you're going to get per level, like you know where you're going to go. So your character isn't really built, but what you can do with him, there is a pathway that you can see. So when you hit level 5, you get 2 attacks, say for example, as a fighter in Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe that excitement of, oh, I'm getting closer to level 5 and I'm going to get 2 attacks. Yeah, you know what I mean? Where that's not a thing in Savage Worlds, and there's
you take an edge. You take an edge. Instead.
No. What I'm saying is that what I'm saying is that your character in Dungeons and Dragons follows like a path. Like you from 1 to 3, you're all pretty much the same. And at 3, you can sort of branch off into 3 directions. Like let's take the thief for example. Could be assassin, thief, or there's another one, right? There's 3 kinds of thieves. You're either the assassin, you're like the regular cut purse guy, or like you're like the sneaky stealthy guy kind of a thing, right? Something like that. So you get to level 3 and you can see your character branch out, and these are now your choices. So you're excited to get to 3 because you can focus in on what your character's going to be. And then at 5th level, maybe your backstab goes up to another die type. So you know that you're going to get more damage when you reach that level. We don't have that in Savage Worlds because you choose it per level. Every time you advance, you have a gazillion choices that things that you can strap onto your character. They're not pre-built. Like if it's a pre-built thing, you can see the expectation of, oh, level 5 is this, oh, this level is this, and you're excited for that. I'm wondering if that might have anything to do with it. Whereas like in Savage Worlds, which is why I like it better, is you could have your mage all of a sudden, he's a great sword fighter, and it's not really kind of a thing in D&D. So I'm just that's just something that sort of popped into my head there. Who knows? Moving on.
That's a tangent that we can address the later episode, maybe the next one. Muegan, one of our listeners.
This guy.
He says, this guy. I'm of the growing opinion there's nothing you can do in an adventure or plot point campaign that can't be done better and punchier as a number of one-sheets. The writing, planning can be more focused and immediate, and you don't end up wasting so much time replotting contingencies for player ingenuity.
Wow, there's a lot of big words in that sentence.
Yeah, basically player messing your plans there. And I kind of agree. And this goes back to the plot point campaign, really, that I mean, it's basically just a series of one sheets or Savage Tales. So,
I guess, and I agree a lot with what he's saying here. The problem is that in these plot point campaigns, if let's say there's a key character that has to exist right through these plot point campaigns, but your players kill him in episode 2 or her in episode 2, your plot point campaign goes skew-if real fast. Whereas if you're relying only on one sheets, I guess plot point campaigns to me are really railroady, and that's again from another discussion. Whereas one sheets, I can have the core element that's happening in the world, and the characters come in and they do their bit for it, and it has it could have X consequence or Y consequence, and then your next one sheet is based on those actions. A plot point is based on the presumption that the players will do X and then X and then X and then X. And if there's a little bit of Y in there, you've got to try and tuck Y back in so it gets back to X. Does that make, does that, you get what I'm saying there, Gary? Like if you look at your, 50 Fathoms, which I haven't played, is there like a key NPC in there that if they get wiped out in the first instance, like the whole thing goes skew-if?
No, it's not designed that way. But I totally know what you're saying. But yeah, it's your first adventure. You end up on a beach. Your boat needs repairs. You cruise down. You find another boat. You take some stuff off that. You come back. Your boat's destroyed. All of your compadres are gone. You chase them into the jungle where they've been captured by some red men. You fight the red men, and you go back and fix your boat and you set sail. And then it's from there. It's free. You're free to go wherever you want. This is where you would insert other adventures and stuff like that. And then the second adventure would be like a completely separate story. But there is no. The idea is the same. You're trying to save the world of Charybdis, but it doesn't matter with this plot point in particular. There is nothing there is no key people inside of it that make it happen that way, right? So, it's kind of it's kind of weird what he's saying. Like it's like, so he's of the growing opinion there's nothing that you could do with an adventure or plot point campaign that can't be done better or punchier as a number of one-sheets. But here's where I want to distinguish the two. Plot point campaigns means you have like 10 one-sheets that are leading you down a path to tell a greater story. That's not what a one-sheet is. A one-sheet's just a single campaign. So that's kind of like a weird to put them together for me.
What I think he's saying is kind of what I was talking about, is that instead of my having 10 one-sheets laid out in a row, my plot point campaign starts out with my adventure starts out with one sheet for that session. Depending on what happens in that session, I then create my second one sheet for my next session that's based on that, as opposed to I've written 10 one sheets and they have to all figure out what. Hello, did my internet just drop out?
No, you're still there.
Did I just drop out? So I've got. I'll rewind that a bit. So what he's saying is essentially how it works better for me is I have one sheet, I play the game, and then depending on what happens on that, I write a new one sheet, and then depending on what happens in that second scenario, I write another one sheet. If I have 10 one sheets in a go, don't give me.
You're good.
The internet. What? Don't.
No, I know what you're saying, because if you write 10 one sheets ahead of time, and you assume that at the end of episode 2 they're going to go this way, and they don't, then your one sheet number 3 is kind of screwed. But that's how I look at it. You adjust according to what the players' decisions are.
Yeah, I don't want to get into a big word salad argument here, but one sheet and a plot point campaign aren't the same thing. So to compare them, I get what he's saying. Instead of making a plot point campaign, make a bunch of one sheets, and then as you tell the story,
make one, wait till the end of that one, and then write another one according to what they're doing.
Yeah,
they did. What he chose.
This guy shows up and he causes a bunch of trouble all the time. This Maugwin guy.
What a troublemaker.
What a jerk.
Name so that we can pronounce it.
Speaking of troublemakers.
Matthew Jones, good friend of the show. I'd say one sheets are my favorite, as they give minimal information, which makes it easier to change the story to fit your player's play style. And I agree. For that, But then again, we got Matt Cutter that says that it makes a plot point campaign a good one makes no assumption about who the characters are or when each episode is to be played. So,
right. I
think that's why there isn't that many plot point campaigns outside of Pinnacle, because they're really hard to write. I found myself with Wise Guys thinking about a plot point campaign, and then I'm like, wait a minute, we got a bunch of criminals that could kill a key NPC at any time. How am I supposed to write a plot point campaign for that? And I decided to wait until I could figure it out. So the play style has a lot to do with which type of adventure format you're gonna adopt for your campaign.
Matthew Jones, what a guy. John Steve, moving on. Nobody cares what Matt has to say. That's why. Brie Nielsen, Larson, whatever her name is. Moving on. John Steve, as a GM, I think one sheets and Savage Tales are my preferred I found over the years that I can't keep a game going long enough to finish anything longer, like a plot point campaign. Well done, Steve. Me too. Too many things in real life disrupt the flow. I first found this out when I tried to run Pathfinder Rise of the Runelords. I also have a tendency to create adventures in the style of old D&D modules, perhaps a 2 or 3 session story arc. I have to agree with John Steve 100%. I feel like he is my kindred spirit. When I'm running the plot point campaign for 50 Fathoms at my store, there's always one of the players can't show up. You know, one of them is doing this. So what I try and do with my plot point campaigns is I never leave them ending in a situation like they're in the middle of the ocean and okay, we're done, right? I like to park them in town at the end of the story so that when I pick up the next arc, if one of the players isn't there, he's just not on the boat when you guys go on this adventure, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the big problems that I have, and the reason that I like plot point campaigns or that style is because I can separate everything out into small little play sessions of a couple hours instead of trying to run a big sort of deal and have my game screwed up by all of a sudden, you know, Johnny the swordsman's not here all of a sudden. Like, where'd he go? And, you know, you're trying to put that in your story.
Yeah, I agree with John in the sense that plot point campaigns are just too long-winded for me. I mean, you're looking at 8 to 12 episodes. Those are the core ones that you have to go through to complete that story, that campaign arc. But then you have room to insert your own Savage Tales in there, character arcs. So when it's all said and done, you've got maybe 20, 25 sessions there. And my sweet spot is, excuse me.
What do you got? What's in your throat there?
A lot of beer. My sweet spot is about 10 to 12 sessions. That's about how long I can run a campaign before I can feel the fatigue settling in there, where, you know, it's easy to start a campaign, but to finish it as much climax as, you know, how you started it.
Tell me more about the climax. It's easy to get started and climax.
It's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult. And like you said, there's always a guy that can't show up. And next game, it's another guy. And pretty soon for GM, that's a killer for me. That's when I start getting tired of that campaign. And
right.
Plus, it's Savage Worlds. You got 100 settings. Let's play another one, you know? So maybe there's room for a lot more smaller plot point campaigns. How about maybe 3 or 4 episodes, plot points for that campaign, and then you insert a couple of your own, and then that's it. Well, maybe we need more of that.
I think the trick to having a really good plot point campaign is that each adventure should be its own individual story, start to finish. You know what I mean? They although they all lead to the same ending, every story has one little bit that leads to the next story. So if you have a player that shows up for the first 3, he's well on the path to figure out what's going on. And if he misses one, he's just missed that adventure inside of this and maybe that one little bit of information. I think that's the key to a good one, is that you don't write them with, you know, with the story being, I don't know how to explain this, of the broader scope, small little adventures, and every one of them just they all point in the same direction, but they're individual units. And then if somebody doesn't show up, that's the thing too. If they get to be too big, 10 to 12 episodes, it's hard getting people to show up every Sunday for 1 3 to 4 hour adventure for 12 sessions. That's like 3 or 4 months, and and they fizzle, and it gets frustrating. So yeah, it's brutal. Yeah. Moving on. Who's next?
Jim Snyder. He says one sheets work great, but each type has its advantages. I agree. It depends what you're trying to do and what your group style is.
Yeah, this is true. They all have their benefits. One sheets are fantastic. They're great to sit down with your friends and just get in there, throw some dice, and have a good time. But they lack the sustenance that you can get into. You know, like I said, you know, building your own fort or something isn't really a thing that you could do when you sit down and play a one sheet. You're just an adventurer going on an adventure. They get too long.
Time.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Mike Morrison, I like the longer Savage Tale type adventures. Sounds nice, Mike.
Yeah, I think he's talking about the ones for Savage Rips. Those tend to be, the adventures for around 30 pages. You can probably run them in 2-3 sessions. I think you're right. You ran that one, right? The Garnet Town Gambit or something.
Yep, that was fantastic. Yeah, and that thing can take a couple. It also depends too. Like, once you get the experience underneath your belt, and you can sort of do the rubber band. This is going to be shorter. This is going to be long. What I consider to be a module is like a 3 or 4 3 to 4 hour sessions, and over and done with. Right? It tells a story. You end it partway through the story on each segment. And I think that's what a Savage Tale should be. You know what I mean? It's the start of the adventure. You introduce your characters. You go on a little kerfuffle and do a little bit of a thing and have your adventure and stuff. And then they come back to town and finish it off with a piece of information that leads to the greater story that finishes in four episodes, kind of a thing. Or maybe they make it from point A to point B, but they need to really get to point D. And along the way, they're fighting the challenges that get you to the final boss guy, right? So Savage Tales are
I like that format too, like the Rippers one, the original Rippers I ran for you guys, the Laughter of Death. That was 4 or 5 sessions, and we were done, and it was punchy and not long enough for people to start getting bored with it, but maybe it could have been a bit longer, but you can always stretch them a little bit.
Yeah, that was a Savage Tale, that one that you were playing there that we went through.
Yeah, I mean, it was a long one. It was a module of about 17 pages or something like that.
Wow.
So,
but that was good because, we started off, we introduced our characters, we ended up in a town. By the time we got to that town, we were waiting for somebody to show up. And there was a little bit of, it was the 1-2 buckle my shoe, whatever that rhyme is that they kept saying. So we did that first one, which is the hook for like, oh, okay, this is pretty interesting. Second one, we discovered a little bit more information. We did some research. We did some of that kind of stuff. And then there was the 4, 5, 6, another kid has died kind of a thing. And then we ended up going to another location in the third one where there's some, I think that's where the clowns came out and started chasing us through the forest and like full on shot me to death with their spray jizz things they had going on there. And then, right. Fourth one, we ended up at the circus, and that was sort of the grand finale of it. That was a fantastic adventure, man. I really enjoyed that one. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, that one. And what's good about the, maybe 4, 5, 6 sessions adventures is that you get to experience more of the rules from Savage Worlds, like the different type of encounters that you can have. You can have dramatic tasks, you can have chases, you can have investigation, you can have role play encounters. So you get to experience the whole width of what Savage Worlds can do. And usually in a one sheet, well, you can. I mean, I look at the one sheets for Saga of the Goblin Horde that really are built around being able to use a couple of these, but usually, in a one sheet, you'll have maybe 2 or 3 scenes and that's it. You'll have a combat, you'll exposition, a little bit of role play, a little bit of investigation, and then you're done.
So Eric,
there he is. He's back. Thought I was by myself.
Internet is just horrible. So we've gone through the different types of adventures. Do you, as this is a podcast for beginners and veterans alike, do you think one particular style lends more to the beginner and one particular style eventually leads more to the veteran? And if so, which ones would you say?
Well, I think this goes back to when we were talking about the hand-holding at the beginning of the show, where I know even me as an experienced GM, a veteran GM, it took me a few years to understand how to use one sheets, really, that they're just a foundation for you to build on. And I think maybe, I think we've got a comment in there from someone that says that beginner GMs probably one sheets are difficult for them, and I tend to agree with that. And I would say that modules are probably better because they spell out everything for you. Usually, most contingency that what might happen, and that's a question I wanted to turn back around to you, which would be: do you think that Savage Worlds really is a good system for beginners, for GMs that are beginning, with the kind of support that they offer for GMs?
That's an interesting comment. Just because I've had with so I've got this young lady that's joined us, and she's training to be a GM, and her introduction to role playing is Savage Worlds. Mm-hmm. She has read the book, and even playing it, and this is Adventure Edition, which I think did a far better job in terms of trying to bring in a new player or new GM than Deluxe did. Mm-hmm. But even then, it makes a lot of assumptions in that book, at least in my opinion, that that Savage Worlds is not the first one that you came to. I always got the impression the way Savage Worlds was written was, you've played the others, now let us save you a bunch of time. Or you've played the others, let me give you a way to be more creative and more free with your ideas. Or you've played the others, but now your character that you play can be anything that you want it to be, and it's not defined by classes, etc. So she struggled with that book, and I'm famous for saying it took me 3 goes to read Deluxe before it sunk in.
Wow, you did well, man. Took me way more than 3.
I was just the way I learned. But so, for instance, the rule set that for our side games that currently looking at the age system, which is a toolkit system, and it's not as, I wouldn't call it as flexible as Savage Worlds, but in terms of the way it presents to a new GM, I think it does a better job of that.
I agree.
But I guess now because I've so much experience in Savage Worlds, like playing that game last night, I was like, oh wow, where's the gang up bonus, or where are these tactical things that I'm so used to within the Savage Worlds system that makes Savage Worlds so cool? And I was really missing them last night. I was like, where is this? Where is that? Why can't this be happening? So Savage Worlds is it's in a niche all of its own. Like, it gives you such freedom as a GM, but if you don't know what you're looking for, that freedom can create analysis paralysis, and it all becomes too much, and there's no direction, there's no way to sort of hone the new player, the new GM in. So in that instance, I would probably advise a plot point campaign as probably the for a new player. So if I especially look at something like ETU, where the concept of ETU is pretty, for an experienced game master, it's not so out there, but to a new player, a new GM picking up a rule set and a setting for the first time, ETU's out there, right? It's not your standard fantasy fare, and the way that it you put it, hold your hand, and I see that, but I think as it guides you down that point, it still makes some assumptions, but it's certainly a lot better than if you're even just handed a module. I think just the way the plot point works. And one of the things that I think Savage Worlds, I'm going to probably get in trouble here, but suffers from is that even though D&D is the most popular game in the world sales-wise, and because they've done such a great job with marketing 5e, the fact is the majority of players, especially those that come to it new, that want to play a role-playing game, it's always in that fantasy genre, right? Traveller is as old as D&D, and yet D&D smashes Traveller. And it's not because Traveller is a harder system or a different system. It's because it's sci-fi, and sci-fi is not as big as fantasy for most role players. And I am generalizing a lot. So
I don't think it has anything to do with the theme and the genre. I think because I read 5e too, and I don't think that they do a particularly good job at explaining what a GM has to do. But the advantage that 5e has over others is that there's so many streams, and people playing.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
game
There's certainly that. But when a new player comes to role playing, it's much easier to get someone to go, right, we're playing a game with dwarves, elves, and halflings and dragons than it is to go, this is a intergalactic adventure that requires trade and dealing with a whole bunch of like different government systems, or this is a noir hard-boiled detective game. Do you know what I mean? Like, people can easier get into that because fantasy has a core platform and anything can be done in it. So I haven't played 50 Fathoms. I really should have a look at it, but I think that's why I got really excited by, is it Giuseppe that did the Golden Glory? Is that what it's called? Yeah, so I'm excited for that because that gives, especially the way he set it up, it gives new game masters a way to just go, right, we're gonna have a game tonight. I roll some dice or I draw some cards, and I've now got a dungeon to play, and I can play on those core fantasy tropes that most people have a handle on, and we can introduce them to Savage Worlds. So going back to the question that I asked you, I think one sheets are actually more for more experienced players, and plot point campaigns are a module. Possibly even a Savage Tale might be really good also for a new player, just because it's a more expanded one sheet.
Yeah. All right. Gage Verano, he was on the show last episode. He says, I really enjoy the plot point campaigns. It gives a lot of structure that makes GMing a lot easier, but also gives room for player-driven arcs and adventures. Yeah, I mean, technically it is, but if you read The Flood for like the first 3 or 4 adventures, you're basically handcuffed, and it's literally a railroad for those first 3, which was kind of frustrating to me. But yeah, in general, I guess that's how they're structured and how they should be run.
Side question: do you think there's a setting out there that does that gives an example of each of those things well? So do you think there's a setting out there that has got a particularly really good one sheet, a setting out there that's got a really good Savage Tale, a really good plot point campaign, and a really good module, quote unquote?
Deadlands, no doubt.
Deadlands for all of it.
Yeah. Deadlands has really good one sheets. It's got 4 plot point campaigns. It's got a bunch of Savage Tales, various length. I like For Whom the Whistle Blows, which is basically Night Train 2 by John Goff, your new boyfriend there. So that's it's really good. You get the whole.
I have a new boyfriend. Or Gary has a new boyfriend.
Yeah, you do.
I'll take
Goff.
him.
Oh, from the forums. Oh, okay, cool. I'm with you. I'm like, what is he talking about? Okay, cool.
Did you guys? International student just showed up. Gage, did you do Gage's?
Yeah, we did Gage.
Did you listen to his last podcast? Something I just wanted to bring up, which I thought was interesting. He is like a big theater of the mind guy. And in his last podcast, he had an incident in the theater of the mind style of game that I thought was fascinating for a guy that does theater of the mind. And it's the main reason that I never do it. But I'm so upset that I missed the last podcast with him, because I would have loved to have talked to him about stuff.
That podcast Gaming with Gage? Gaming with Gage,
yeah, it's really good. Anyways, that said, who are we at? Are we at Jan Jetmar? Jan Jetmar?
Can I do Jan? Because I'm a big fan of Jan.
Have at it.
So Jan Jetmar. My preferred format would be linked mini plot point campaigns. All the benefits of plot point campaigns, but you can stop earlier without feeling you are missing something important. Here. Sometimes I think some plot point campaigns I read, they are just too long. They've gone too long. Get to the point already. Because the longer you make it to get to the end, there's more chances your players are going to go, no, you know what? I'm going left. I'm going to the Quickie Mart. I'm not going to go save the Earth. I'm going to the Quickie Mart. And the whole thing falls apart.
All right. Yeah, I agree. Mike Coombs, he says, I love it. Absolutely love it when an adventure comes with paper minis, pre-gen characters, and a papercraft bus. They must be referring to the Wild Hunt there. Okay, it doesn't need the bus. I want to read it once and sit down to play. I don't even want to choose edges or skills. I wanted to have some role play and some combat and some aspect of play that is fresh and tied to the setting. After I've played this, I'm in a good position to want to buy the setting and build characters. Now I want a plot point campaign or a world with lots of adventure hooks strewn about. I'm ready to buy Savage Tales for it. I hear you talk about adventure generators. Those are random encounter tables. Not at all interested in that. So that's interesting. That's kind of what I've referred to before in previous shows, where I say that there should be a one sheet for free for a setting so you can try it, and some pre-gens for it. I know that personally, with like over 100 settings for Savage Worlds, if I want to try it, I want pre-gen characters. I want at least one sheet to run it, and then I'll decide if I like that setting or not. And that's a good point, Mike. As for adventure generators, they're a big thing. A lot of people like them. I've tried using them, especially for Beasts and Barbarians, or even when I was running, what was I running? I was running Deadlands, Hell on Earth. And although they're well done, I guess they just don't work for me. My mind doesn't work that way. I don't get inspired by them. I don't like them. What do you guys think about adventure generators? Have you ever used them?
Yeah. Yeah, I've used them a number of times when, especially when my tank is low and I need inspiration.
So how do you use them? How do they work for you? How do you make them work for you?
For me, they prompt creativity. So I never roll in random adventure tab. I go, right, that's exactly what I'm running now. It's more if I have to piece these components together, what's a scenario that I can build from that? It's a bit like rolling Rory story cubes or something like that. It's I've got a couple of, whereas individually those things might not mean a lot, but when I cram them together and I have to try and create an adventure out of that, it becomes like a challenge for me. And then I go, oh, okay, cool. So and then I create a base story from that. I may even like remove a role. I might go, well, that one doesn't apply to me, or it's the odd man out, throw that out. So I never use any random generators as this is how I'm going to roll it, run it, because that's how I rolled it. It's more take those elements, those random elements, mesh them together and see what I can come up with. Yeah. So for me, they're very good for on the fly. I think they work well in a Savage Worlds game because Savage Worlds is just so easy to run once you've got the core elements locked into your brain. It's harder with other systems where you've got to know a whole spell book or that kind of thing. But for Savage Worlds, I think they work really, really well. At least they do for me.
Coolness. So right. I haven't used adventure generators either. And this is the reason why. In my short stint inside of Savage Worlds, the last 3-4 years now, I've said this before, there's so many different settings that are really cool and have fantastic ideas behind them that, when I was playing my 50 Fathoms, for example, I want to get in, I want to play the campaign and feel the story out, and then get out and try another setting. And so to use a random adventure generator in between filling in certain things in the plot point campaigns, I never bother doing any of that. I run PPCs start to finish with nothing in between because I'm not looking for a long setting. If I have to increase the level sporadically of my character, say from like novice to seasoned or whatever, from 5 to 25, I would just completely give them 4 advances, and I would just say, here we're taking the story a little while down the road, say a month or so. What have you guys been doing for the last month? They can figure out their their advances. But adventure generators to create, there's so much Savage Worlds material out there that you can try that, man. But if I was like Paris, where I had to sit down and build 6 adventures a week kind of a thing, I would absolutely use an adventure generator to prompt ideas. I like the idea of them, but I've never used them.
So question for you, Gary, just in that, and again, this will probably be for another episode, but where's the payoff for the player in that? like you got to tell the story that you did, and your players did get to follow along in the story, but did they get that satisfaction from growing their character from a novice to seasoned, expert, veteran, heroic? Because I get the impression if you're jumping from system to system, from setting to setting, there's none of that long-term payoff for, man, we've struggled, we've fought, but now look at my mage, or look at my paladin, or look at my gunslinger. They've come so far, and this is the character they are today. The character is almost a throwaway, aren't they, in that situation? It's that's more of like a board game piece than a character that I'm invested in.
I hear what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying, but you're making the presumption that I play with the same people all the time, right?
That's true.
When I go to my Sunday gaming game, my Sunday game at the store, what I do in that scenario is I'm like, okay, I'm willing to run this adventure or this adventure. So if, let's say, I'm willing to run 50 Fathoms, I need a commitment from you that you are going to show up for the next 3 months on Sundays. If you can't commit to that, don't sign up for my game. Then I run that. And because I have the same players in that system or that setting for 3 months, I can sort of power focus on them and say, okay, you might be jumping levels here, but that doesn't mean that the story, for example, won't have all of the elements of building your character up or creating wealth or adventures or any of that kind of thing. I'll give you another example. I'm playing online with Matt, and I'm playing online with Charles Jean, and each of them inside of the new town of New Haven has actually, one of them is building a brothel and the other is building a lumber mill. So they have these things going on behind the scenes that we start with that. What's happening with your lumber mill? You need to hire somebody, so we'll role play him going into town. And then as the story progresses, they end up in the tavern at the end of their day. And that's where I will start the story that we're going to go through for this adventure, right? So it has all the elements there. But in my Sunday game, if I'm going to do drop-ins like for Adventures League or something like that, I never know who's sitting down. So the characters, like you're saying, become very chess-like pieces on a board. They're just, you're showing up for this adventure. You could be gone the next one. I don't want to sit down and take the time to build a thing with you guys when you're not going to be here next week. And I'll have 3 other people show up and 3 other people not there, right? So...
No, just an interesting, again, not for this show, but I'd love to have a discussion about characters and that sort of payoff for players, what they're looking for out of their characters. But
Cool.
Let's focus on adventures.
Right. Eric, hack this guy's name up for me, buddy.
That sounds Scandinavian. Well, he's written to us before. Tore Peterson, Bjertnæs Peterson. He says, I prefer Savage Tales and one-sheets that can be ported into a campaign. Mini plot point campaigns where maybe 3 Savage Tales are linked is also fine. Again, I'd love to see those because I think that doesn't really exist. There's an adventure for Lankhmar, Eyes of Gormush, that are 4 interlinked adventures, and it feels a lot like a mini plot point campaign for me, but I haven't seen any of that around. Anyway, he says full plot point campaigns vary a lot in quality, and it's not one that I like that is a lot of wasted material in a setting. In my opinion, Savage Tales give a good understanding of the setting, and you can cherry pick the ones that you would like to include in your campaign. That can be done. You can string a bunch of campaigns together, especially older material for Savage Worlds, the old Rippers modules. That's what I was going to do with the campaign we started a while back, string them together. That's possible. It makes for a longer campaign, and then you have to find ways to link them.
Cool. Do you want me to take Brian's?
Take Brian's.
Take Brian. Brian Casa Jr. First of all, the availability of pre-written adventures heavily influences my decision-making process when I'm thinking about picking up a new setting. It's all that's available. If all that's available for it is some one-sheets, I probably won't buy it. I have very limited time, and for myself, crafting my own material is a very slow process. Enjoyable, but slow. Without pre-written adventures, there is no way I could keep up with my weekly sessions. As for the plot point campaigns, they can be a bit long. For example, I'm getting prepped to run Eris Beta 5. Given the plot point campaign itself, plus Savage Tales and player background-driven stories, I estimate this is going to take us roughly 120 to 180 hours to complete.
Wow.
Yeah, at one session a week with a 3-hour session, that's close to a year at the very least, and that's providing we make every session. Good luck with that, buddy. We usually miss a few here and there, so it'll probably be over a year. A little long, but worth it for an enjoyable campaign. As for the sweet spot, for me, that would be something that can be completed within 45 to 60 hours. That's about 4 to 5 months worth of sessions for my group. That's just long enough to make it interesting and give us that sense of accomplishment when we are done. Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah, as I said before, there seems to be no middle ground between, a Savage Tale and a full-blown plot point campaign. Like what I'm getting, well, it's only 2 people, but I'm sure there's a lot more players that would echo this, where there's probably a market for shorter plot point campaigns out there. We need them.
Yep.
Okay.
I like what he has to say.
Apart from that, apart from that, is there an adventure type / system setting style that isn't in Savage Worlds that you've seen somewhere else that you think would work in Savage Worlds? Is that one we throw out to the listeners just because I've thrown it at you at the last second and you're both looking at me like deer in headlights?
No, I mean, like I said, I'm surprised there isn't more standard modules, what we're used to for like D&D and these type of games. I've played a bunch of games, read a bunch of games, and every one of them seem to have their own niche when it comes to the type of adventures. I mean, I look at games like Powered by the Apocalypse, where they don't, I mean, sure, Monster of the Week has them, but usually they don't even have adventures for these. They have like a synopsis, and that's about it. You were talking about Age. I've been reading Dragon Age, and they have modules of about 35 pages long. Then you look at, I play some Gumshoe as well. Yeah, you get adventures up to 180 pages, and these are different. There's a type for Gumshoe that is really different, and I don't think it would. Well, it might work for Savage Worlds, but basically, you give the players a prop, and the prop becomes their lead for the adventure. Like for Night's Black Agents, you got an adventure called Dracula Dossier, which basically you give them the novel Dracula from Bram Stoker, and they have to find where Dracula is and kill him. And they have to use the novel as well. There's a special version for the game with annotations where you'll go to places in the novel to try to find where he is, right? So it's all cool. Sandbox and character driven. Now that seems like a lot of work. I've always wanted to run that, and there's another one for Trail of Cthulhu called the Armitage Files. But I don't know. I'm quite happy with the formats that are typical to Savage Worlds. They work for me mainly because, like you, Paris, I typically don't use them as is. I'll use characters, scenes, maybe hooks from them, but as a rule of thumb, I just prefer to run my own material. I don't have to sift through 30 pages of material to find the information I need because the players ask a question. If I run my own material, I know it. I can just go ahead with it. But I understand, and we're going to find out with more people here, that some people just don't have the time to write their own material and run them, or they're not good at improvising, running at the seat just like that. They just can't do it, and I understand that. So do we need more modules? Which format do we need more? Because I keep seeing that on Facebook where the new players are coming in and asking where all the adventures are. And people tell them, well, you got a bunch of one sheets on there. You got a few adventures. You got plot point campaigns. But besides that, it's slim pickings, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how across the board they are. Patrick Greenlaw on the bottom there, he says he also likes one sheets, but he's heard from several GMs that they are too light on detail, which I think is kind of funny that we're talking about this, because I find that the lighter something is on detail at this stage of the game that I'm at, the more that I can expand on it. I'm actually preferring light on detail, bullet points. Don't fill in the entire story. Don't tell me what all of the NPCs' names are, that kind of thing. Like, I don't need to know all the details. I just sort of need to know the basic premise of what this adventure should be about. You know, fill it up with as much stuff as you seem or deem to be necessary. But here's the problem. If they're too heavy on detail, you're constantly looking back. Okay, what was this person's name? What is their interest in the story? Why are they here? And you can forget these kinds of things. Where if you take something that's bullet point, you've just got a couple of things that you can quickly skim over while you're trying to tell your story, and maybe that will refresh yourself. And then I take notes all the time too. So I'll ask my players, give me a name for this person in our Sunday morning game that we're playing. Every character that's come up in the story, I've asked the players to name that person. And we've got except for one of them, I got to tell you my sweet story. You know what the blacksmith's name is? Jack Black Smith. I thought that was pretty ingenious when I started writing his name's Jack Blacksmith. But you've got Mayor, I think it's Mayor McGreedy or something like that, because the politicians and stuff like that. And we've got the waitress's name is Queefy or some weird thing like that, right? It's it's cool to let your players and make them, and then I take notes, or I label my miniatures inside a tabletop simulator so that I can always remember their names just by mousing over them and stuff like that. But man, for me, less is more, and it's a cool place to be at when you have, I've got so many years behind me that I can pick from past experiences. So yeah. Anyways,
so taking two things that we've touched on in this episode, types of adventures, and is Savage Worlds a good game for new GMs? Does Savage Worlds need a starter box? Does Savage Worlds need an adventure that handholds or leads the GM? So as they're playing the adventure, it shows the core concepts of Savage Worlds and how they differ from other role-playing games, or how they should be used within context of a game session. And so that it gives some structure to that freedom that Savage Worlds has. I know that sounds like an odd statement, but so essentially at the moment we're saying Savage Worlds can do anything, and then your GM looks at it and goes, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So we have something that says Savage Worlds can do anything. Here, let me give you 3 examples, right, within the context of an adventure or a story that we're running. Do you think that would be something that would definitely benefit this rule system? Because I, for one, do think it would.
I totally do.
They do have the test drive. Now, it isn't a box, but I think it's a testament to how easy it is to play the game.
Yep.
There's the Wild Hunt. There's what the latest one was for Lankmar, I believe. We don't have one for Suede yet, but I'm sure they'll come up with one. I know that if there was a starter set in a box for Savage World, I'd buy it, even
me
though
too.
I don't. It's just collectors.
I'd love to see a starter box that maybe done something no other starter box I've seen done yet, and that is maybe hit 3 genres. So you'd have like a fantasy genre, a space genre, and let's say cowboy genre. So they're short adventures, and they show you how this same rule set can be used in these different genres with different situations. But it would give, I think, a better understanding of what it's taken us a long time to learn, is like how they apply within a situation, how they can be multi-used, but so used in the same context, but to provide different situations and different outcomes, if that makes sense. So I'd love to see a book or a starter box that sort of says, right, these next 2 sessions, you and your players are going to be playing, a fantasy adventure, and these are what you'll see, and these are the rules that you use in this situation, and this is what what a power looks like in this situation with this trapping, and then we're going to switch it over, and you might play supers, like a quick supers game based on the rules in Suede, not Superpowers Companion, and then you get to see how those same rules and those same components get reskinned essentially in a different format. So the game then, or that adventure then holds your hand, and that way it says, right, now this is what it's like with all magic and superpowers, but look at the way combat changes when you don't have a healer and you don't have laser blasts flying around everywhere, but you've got to face bullets, and how the game changes, because each one of those settings changes Savage Worlds quite dramatically. You take a healer from fantasy out of Savage Worlds, it's a very different game in terms of combat and stuff like that. So,
I agree. I mean, I got a bunch of starter sets from other systems on my book back there, and I know what you're saying, because sure, Savage Worlds has the test drive, but it's basically rules adventure. But you look at a game like the Star Wars Fantasy Flight Star Wars. I've got one of their starter set there, and it's basically you got the adventure, and as you're playing, they teach you how to run the game, which is quite different from the way they do it with test drive. Same thing with, I just got recently the Call of Cthulhu one. I've got one, the Lost Mine of Phandelver for 5e. And I think, these games do a much better job of teaching the game as you're running the adventure than Savage Worlds. Is there a market for that? Is this something that Pinnacle is interested in?
There should be. You signed me up with a cool box set that has 3 different adventures, a sci-fi, a western, and a straight fantasy. You give me some dice, you give me some bennies, and I'm good to go. And then each module should be written, because when you buy like the Dungeons and Dragons box set, you don't get the manual, so you don't have to put in core or any of that. There should be the basic understanding that you have the player's handbook, or you have the core book. A little bit of an understanding, and then the module should be written like, here's a good time to highlight what it can do, highlight the dramatic tasks, and all of the other sort of cool improvised combats and quick combats and stuff, and write them that way in each one, just like Per said. I think that'd be sweet. You give me a starter set,
and then you could and you could have one adventure that's sort of focused on like social interaction tasks. You could have one that has a chase, so it highlights the chase rules. You could have dramatic tasks, like you say. Your first one might be fantasy, and it'd be really basic. This is the core rules, and you can get through that in a night or 2 nights, and everyone goes, all right, now I have a solid grounding on the wild die and the various die types for a skill, for skills and attributes. And then your second adventure could be, well, we're going to add this element, and this is how it gets used, and we're building on the first one. So coming soon from Just Insert Imagination.
We got a new job for you, man.
Well, they had the last year they had the Sleepy Hollow adventure that they released to highlight the chase rules. We recorded an episode, and then by the time we were ready to release it, Shane changed the chase rules totally, so we couldn't. And he asked us, he said, yeah, guys, it's just going to confuse a bunch of people if you release it. So that was a wasted episode. But I thought the way they presented that adventure, which was really just like 2 or 3 encounters strung together, but they really walked you through how chase worked. And that's something that we see come up on social media a lot, like how to do chase work. Even if the rules to me are clear, but to some people they're not. And I think
chases go back to D&D.
Right. And then, we've got a long message here from Richard Woolcock. And I know this is a Richard Woolcock show because we talk about him all the time. But
rocks.
Yeah, well, we're not going to read that because it's too long. But basically,
it is a long one, isn't it?
Yeah, he likes the one, Savage Tale, the plot point style adventure structure. He likes
long walks on beaches, sunsets. Yeah. He likes hot dogs with mustard. No?
Yeah, he talks about Evernight, which is the first adventure released for Savage Worlds, which is alien invasion in a fantasy world, and this one is basically, like you said, a D&D style adventure. It's very railroady. Heroes of Drakenheim as well, which is from a licensee. But yeah, there's quite a few there, but it seems like if you're coming from another system and you're looking for your D&D modules or even other types, like I mentioned before, Powered by the Apocalypse, that has a really, really weird way of presenting adventures. But yeah, you're coming from these systems and you have to embrace the plot point campaigns or the one sheets. Otherwise, yeah, slim pickings. But yeah, let's get a starter set going.
Sweet. You got a favorite adventure, Eric, that you've ever run in your life?
Marriage.
That's a burden. No, I'm kidding.
Wow.
No, I quite like the Laughter of Death for Rippers. I had a good time running that. I had a fun time reading it too. There's For Whom the Whistle Blows for Deadlands. That's a really good adventure too. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. A shorter one, another one I ran for you guys was Chickens in the Mist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's an awesome horror adventure, B-movie type of thing. That's a TPK adventure.
That was awesome. Old Nick Lampslice took a shovel to the face. He took the shovel of doom right to the face. That's where the big nerd came from. That was a friggin' fantastic adventure. What about you, Paris? You got anything that you like specifically in Savage Worlds? All right, moving on. Yeah, 5 minutes.
There's a one shot that I fall back on. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it's off the Pinnacle website, and the premise of the story is that it's the player characters have helped the town fend off an undead attack, and then they're resting, and a guard comes bursting in, telling that all these rats are pouring out of the sewer. It's very odd, and the whole one sheet is about exploring this.
The Tomb of Horrors.
I'm not remember what it's called, but you go down the sewers and there's a small adventure there. It shows a couple of things that are pretty cool in that system, in that one sheet, which is cool. I'm just getting real quickly back to Richard Woolcock. He's got I noticed something what he said, and hopefully you guys can enlighten me on it. He says, another style I've run is almost completely improvised. Take an adventure seed, perhaps 50 to 100 words, and use oracle tables, normally used for solo gaming, to build the story on the fly. This is the ultimate in low prep and can be played without a GM, but it takes quite a lot of practice to get used to. Do you know what an oracle table is?
I think it's one of these tools he's talked about. It's called the GM emulator. It's a way you can play an RPG without a GM.
Is that like the Mythic system or something?
Yeah, I think something like that. Mythic GM emulator or something like that. Yeah. I've never used them, but I think that's what he's referring to. He's a big fan of those.
What was that? There was something you sent me, Spark of Fate or something like that.
Yeah, that's different. That's actually next month. Us guys are going to do that. It's a world building document. It's a framework that you use to create the world, but not just a GM. Everybody in the group together gets to world build. And I'm modifying it a little bit for the purpose of the show. It was made for the Fate system, but it's world building. There's not really any rules or mechanics in there, so it can be used. And we're going to use that, a Spark and Fate Core, it's called. I think it's free on DriveThruRPG. What about you, Gary? Gary, favorite module, adventure?
From the stuff I've played, I think the 50 Fathoms one is fantastic. I loved it. Another good one. Yeah. Shocking, I know.
Right.
I just that whole story arc, man, is just really cool. Like you're saving the entire world. It's so grand. You know what I mean? It's so heroic. One of the other cool ones that I played was Don't Drink the Water. All you got to do is just take like a cartload of guns and ammunition down across the Mexican border, right? And that's it. It's Deadlands, yeah. And so many cool things happen. All of a sudden, you're getting overrun at night by. This is a funny story. My son was sleeping in the sleeping bag with his character. One of the things that he took was hard sleeper, or the one where you don't wake up very easily. So they set up. Yeah, they set up camp. He's sleeping away. The zombies come in because that was part of the story. And him and this guy Michael were playing their characters and whatnot. One of them was on watch, and all of a sudden he's like, the zombies are coming in, and he's like, "What's going on?" And so he's trying to wake my son's character up, and he failed every roll, and he failed, and he failed, and he failed. Like 4 rounds go by, and he failed. So finally, Michael stops what he's doing with his character, and he starts kicking the tent. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you an additional couple of +2 to your roll. So my son finally wakes up, and Michael's just yelling. He was like, "There's zombies!" My kid doesn't even open the door to the tent. Like, he just literally grabs his shotgun and just squeezes the trigger. He had also taken named weapon, so you get that bonus. Like it's like a trademark weapon, that one. So he had taken that as well. He didn't open the flap or nothing. He just squeezed the trigger. Rolls like a friggin' 30 something to hit. So I'm like, with all the negatives that I was going to impose, you totally and just from inside the tent, just kabam, blew like zombies to smithereens, and then slowly started to climb out. It's just awesome, man. It was good times. It was favorable. And then, yeah, a lot of the Deadlands stuff is really cool. I did The Flood, which I really liked. Some cool things happened there. It's a great story. It's a cool introduction to Hellstrom and whatnot. And there's a really cool one sheet called Daddy's Boy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That's another Deadlands. But the cool part is there's a kid and his robot, and his robot is in a broken down shed. They have a new shed kind of built, right? And so it's cool because the robot can't talk, even though you find out that I'm not going to ruin it. So you got to do a little bit of role playing with this robot thing when it comes out, because it comes out guns a-blazing, and you're trying to make it like simmer down and not sort of annihilate everybody. But that was really cool. When it was all said and done, a bunch of dudes rolled in, and I had this behind the wagon fight. So when they were shooting each other, everything was like, there were so many negatives, and that it was just like this huge gun battle that just was bullets flying for so long. Yeah, I like those ones. That was pretty cool. Good stuff. Anyways, let's put a sock in this bad boy, because we're running long here, long in the tooth.
Yep, let's wrap this up. Well, that's a wrap, folks. Let us know what you think. I mean, if you haven't weighed in on your favorite type of adventures, let us know. Hopefully, you find the right type for you that works for you and your group. And yeah, get in touch with us. Our email is thewildeye@gmail.com. All in one word. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube. We're the Wild Eye Podcast. And if you want to chat with us, we're the Nerds International group on Twitter as well, @the Wild Eye. And finally, Patreon. www.patreon.com/the Wild Eye. If you want to throw us a buck, that will allow us to do our reviews, which reminds me I have to finish reading that book so we can review it this month.
Get it together, man. Get it together. Now, I just want to say now, if you're going to throw us a buck, especially find a decent sized rock and wrap it up inside the door, and then just wing it really hard at Eric. That's how you throw us a buck.
That's going to work. Yep. So, yeah, that way we'll keep doing that show. When nobody is interested in what we're saying, then we'll fade away. We'll pod fade.
When we're old. When we're old and we've had enough.
That's right. And now Gary's going to take us to Patreon Jingle.
All right. Here's a little jingle about adventures I want to play with our patrons. Here we go. Alan Bray. How about a little detective adventure called Who Roofied Alan? Wasn't me. Bubbles, Conrad Erasmus Neubert, Corey Judd. I wrote a little western adventure for us called The Magic 6-Inch Pistol. Dan Brown, Daryl Cartier, and Frank Turfler. What say we play a little sci-fi adventure I wrote called A Long Trip to Uranus? Oh. Gil Deshard, Louis Strad, Jan Yetma. I'm thinking we play a high fantasy adventure called Touch My Fireballs. Jan Schonheim and John Peterson. How about a special horror adventure called Dead Men Can't Say No? Carl Kiesler, Kevin Stanley, and Manuel Sams. I wrote a special pirate adventure called Too Many Seamen in My Port. Ahoy! Michael Morrison, Mr. Stagg, and Maugwan. I'm thinking post-apocalyptic called Ooh, Check Out My Third Arm. Patrick Greenlaw, Perry Chalmers. How about a sweet little jungle adventure called Venom for the Snake Charmer? Psst, psst. Pure Mongrel, Ray Asteria, Scott Marshland Davis. I got a sweet supers adventures I wrote called Take Off Those Tights. Oh yeah. Sean Richer, Stephen Dragonspawn, and Sid the Squid. How about we play a little gangster adventure? Stuffed in the Trunk. Ugh. Zovia, RPG Maps. I wrote a special Tarzan adventure where we live in a treehouse and you're tied up and trying to escape, but I always catch you again and bring you back and retie you up again. I didn't give it a name, sorry. And last but not least, Uncle J. Raz and Andy Hall. I got a special detective game I like to call Clue, where we do it in every room with different utensils, and you tell me which one you like the best. I don't know if that's how it played, but it is now. And that's it for this special edition of Playing Games. Thanks for your support. It allows me to do these ridiculous things. All right. Very cool. All right.
So this is Eric saying, grab your sword by the balls.
This is Paris saying, my head is full of starter sets for Savage World. So send in any ideas that you've got.
Nice.
Just insert your imagination.
This is Gary saying, don't let your adventures end up in jail. Keep your pants on, everybody. Keep it fun. Thanks, everyone. We're out.
Wild Eye Podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by Pinnacle Entertainment Group or official Pinnacle licensees. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of the respected owners. All music and artwork is used with permission of Pinnacle Entertainment Group. All items are used under fair use and educational and review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Wild Eye Podcast.